Who was she? What was in the bag? And why had her final words felt less like reassurance and more like a warning? It was a warm spring evening when David Lawrence, a 19-year-old college sophomore, decided to catch a baseball game with his best friend Mark. The game started at 7:05 p.m., but thanks to an intense series of extra innings, it dragged on past midnight. By the time David dropped Mark off at his home on the south side of town, it was well past 1:30 a.m. Exhausted but exhilarated from the game, David set off on the quiet streets back to his suburban neighborhood. The route home was familiar. Traffic lights flashed yellow in the empty streets. The hum of the engine, the only sound as David's car cut through the night. Around 1:58 a.m., he approached the T-junction, a lonely intersection that had always struck him as eerie, even in the daytime. Tonight, under the dim glow of a solitary streetlight, it felt downright sinister. David slowed his car to a stop as the light turned red. The intersection was empty. In hindsight, he would reflect on how easy it would have been to roll through the light. Yet, earlier that week, a professor had shared a quote during a lecture. The light seemed to mock him, refusing to change. He drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, his eyes scanning the deserted intersection. That's when he saw her. Sitting on a weathered bus bench to his left was a woman. She was small, thin, and dressed in a baggy coat that swallowed her slight frame. Her hair was stringy and dark, falling in uneven strands over her face. As David's gaze lingered, their eyes meet, and a chill ran down his spine. He quickly looked away, pretending not to see her, but it was too late. In the periphery of his vision, he saw her stand. She picked up a large bag from beside the bench and began walking towards his car. David's heart raced. His hand instinctively shot out to check that all the doors were locked. He could feel the tension building as she approached, her steps deliberate and unhurried. When she reached the driver's side window, she placed her bag on the ground and tapped on the glass. The sound was soft but insistent. David turned to look at her. Up close, she seemed older, perhaps in her late 40s or early 50s. But there was something ageless and unsettling about her appearance. Her face was gaunt, with sunken cheeks and tired eyes. She motioned for him to roll down the window. David hesitated. His car had automatic windows, and the thought of accidentally lowering it too far made him nervous. After a moment's hesitation, he pressed the button just enough for a thin gap to open. The woman leaned in, her voice low and monotone. "My boyfriend beat me up," she said. "I have a friend who lives down the street. Can you give me a ride?" David's mind raced. He had heard stories of carjackings and ambushes, where seemingly harmless individuals lured unsuspecting drivers into traps. Still, her words tugged at his sense of decency. What if she was telling the truth? He glanced at her bag, large enough to conceal almost anything, and decided he couldn't take the risk. "I'm sorry," David said, his voice shaking slightly. "I can't. I have to get home." The woman didn't react. She leaned closer, her face now inches from the window, and repeated the exact same words, her tone eerily identical. "My boyfriend beat me up. I have a friend who lives down the street. Can you give me a ride?" David's unease deepened. There was something mechanical about her delivery, as if she were reciting lines from a script. He shook his head more firmly this time. I really can't. I'm sorry," he said, glancing nervously at the traffic light, willing it to change. The woman didn't budge. For a third time, she leaned in, her voice softer but less insistent. "My boyfriend beat me up. Before she could finish, the light turned green. Relief flooded David's body as he lifted his foot off the brake. Slowly, he inched forward, muttering an apology as he prepared to drive away. The woman stood still, watching the car roll forward. Then, as David was about to accelerate, she leaned down one last time and said 5 words that froze him in his tracks. "You made the right decision." Her tone was flat, almost emotionless, but the words carried an ominous weight that David couldn't ignore. She picked up her bag and began walking back toward the bench as if nothing had happened. David didn't wait to see what she would do next. He slammed on the gas, speeding through the intersection and away from the woman. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he fought back tears. The adrenaline coursing through his veins made him tremble. By the time he reached his driveway at 2:12 a.m., he was a mess of emotions. Fear, relief, and confusion all swirling together. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat in his room, replaying the encounter over and over in his mind. Who was she? What was in the bag? And why had her final words felt less like reassurance and more like a warning? In the weeks that followed, David scoured local news reports, searching for any mention of strange activity near the intersection. He found nothing. No reports of a woman matching her description, no incidents involving suspicious individuals. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he had narrowly avoided something terrible. Months later, David shared the story with a friend who worked in law enforcement. The friend listened intently, then offered a chilling theory. She could have been working with someone. There's a tactic where they use a decoy, usually a woman or someone who seems vulnerable, to lure people in. The second you open your door or roll down your window, someone else comes out of hiding. It's textbook ambush behavior. The explanation made sense, but it didn't bring David any comfort. In fact, it only deepened his unease. What if he had rolled down the window a little further? What if he had unlocked the door? Years later, David still avoids driving at night whenever possible. The intersection remains etched in his memory, a place where his instincts and a well-timed traffic light might have saved his life. And though he tries to convince himself that the woman was harmless, her parting words echo in his mind whenever he thinks back to that fateful night. You made the right decision. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing and liking the channel. If you know of any eerie stories you'd like exposed, please comment below.